your host, Cynthia Thompson. If you watch my show regularly, a few weeks ago we had a conversation about Black Lives Matter, but my guest here beside me said all lives matter, which is true, and we want to keep this conversation going. But if you don't remember who was on my show from the last time, I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves, and let's start with you.
I'm Dr. Honeycutt.
I'm Wanda.
I'm Kit Coble.
Vivian Simmons.
So the last time we talked about this, we talked about the shootings that have been going on, not just in the South, but in the North. I haven't heard of any out West of police officers shooting black kids, black men. Have you heard any out West?
Well,
Kid?
one that sticks out that's been in media rotation is Ezell Ford in Los Angeles. He was shot on the street by officers, and there hasn't been too much disclosure on that case, so it's not in the forefront. But he was shot around the same time as Crawford was, the guy in Walmart who had the fake gun. Around the same time, about sometime late last year in December. Yeah.
So it's mostly been happening on the East Coast.
On the East Coast, yeah.
So we know.
Yes. So it happens all over, but the ones that get media attention have been in the South and in the on the Eastern Seaboard.
So why do you think that's so, ladies? Because we're on Eastern Standard Time? I mean, it shouldn't matter, should it?
I don't know. I think probably the South is probably still more sensitive to racial profiling and anything dealing with, black versus white because of slavery and the last 400 years of oppression and coming out of that. And so, everybody over towards the West is probably more liberal or more free-feeling. They seem to be okay with carrying guns. If you think about Texas, everybody carries a gun. They even have tanks. But you don't hear about people getting shot over there. And, if you think about that, a lot of the younger children, I know children that have some family members that when they were little kids, they were white and, mixed, but they got guns for Christmas. And a bow and arrow, and it was like that was a natural occurrence. And I know some students now that for Christmas, this past Christmas, they were given guns, like real guns, rifles, that they would go with their parents out on the ATVs in the woods, go hunting. But it seems okay. But, like Kik was saying earlier, if a black male has a toy gun, he gets shot. So I'm just curious, why is that such a huge disparity there?
Yes, I didn't even know that.
Well, but I think and I think our ancestors always taught our children about firearms and hunting and guns. And so I think that there are still, my son hunts. I cannot for the life of me fathom how he got into this. and I will admit that he did do some rabbit hunting with my husband early on. But he hunts now. But now, when he does go hunting, it's a novelty for a black man to hunt. We don't hunt for sport anymore. And I think for a lot of people, hunting and guns is a lot about sport. It's not always about a weapon to use to kill somebody, which it can be used for that, as is so many other things. But that really is not always the intent. And so my sons did get BB guns. I mean, that's how we all saw Christmas Story.
Yes, we did. That's what made me want a BB gun when I was a kid.
Everybody wanted a BB gun. Yeah. And so the thing of it is that you have to remember, I think we need to remember about guns is it's also part of the culture of the country.
That's true.
And so, but we're in now, we're using human beings. The human beings are the people being preyed upon now. I think we see a lot more of that now than it used to be. Or is it? I think now we have a 24-hour life cycle of news.
This is true.
And so everything is reported. And so, and Kit, you can talk about this, about the study that was done of all of us black people who were hanged.
Yes, that's a that was the hunting,
yes,
the prevalent hunting back in the day. These are modern day lynchings. Like that's with a lot of people like Dr. Cress Wilson and a lot of Umar Johnson, Dr. Smalls. They said that these killings by police officers or unarmed men is just an offshoot or psychological trauma that's carried to the next generation. Because if you look at pictures of lynchings, that's the same thing. And people went out hunting black men. And they weren't hunting criminals. They were hunting people that they thought were uppity, that people that they thought were a threat to a white woman's purity, because Emmett Till was killed for supposedly whistling at a white woman. They drug him behind a car, and then Mr. Byrd was drugged behind a pickup truck not too many years ago.
That's true. I remember that.
I forgot which state it was in, but it was in Texas. Yeah. He was drugged behind. So we see that these things persist, but it's all about how much media attention it gets, because not every one of these killings that happen are reported. And I dig really deep into newspapers and internet articles, and I'm surprised there's only about 10% of unarmed black killings by white police officers that are actually reported and covered in the news. If you do your research, you will find many, and I think that they say we're averaging around 2.2 or 2.5 per week, and that's unarmed. Not even people down in police custody, like what just happened with Freddie Gray, because he broke his back because they didn't properly secure this man, and that's the same as shooting or killing
Pretty
that person.
much.
I mean, they stopped at 3 places and didn't give him medical care. That shows a blatant disregard for our lives.
But before they put him in the fan, like his back was broke.
But even before that, they ran after the man because he made eye contact.
That was.
I mean, there was no justification.
He was too uppity. He too uppity.
He made eye contact.
That's persisting. Those attitudes persist.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I really haven't seen a lot of anybody showing how many deaths by like black on black crime just in general, as far as like unarmed or what's going on compared to the officer killings. It's like I would be curious to see exactly how many of those are going on that we don't know about. Because people only post the ones that are officer related, but what about the ones that are done in our community?
Well, it's a lot. Statistically, it's high. We know about black on black crime. We live it. We see it. I mean, so much so. I think now that we hear it and we kind of move on. There's a certain callousness about it now, and it shouldn't be that way. But I think we've become kind of like hardened to it. Oh, okay, because it doesn't affect our everyday lives, because we live in different communities, and so I think we hear this and we go, oh, that's really bad, and then we keep it moving.
But I wonder if people started standing behind that and protesting every time that happened, would it really, it's almost like those lives don't matter. Those lives are people, any lives, like I'll say, all lives matter, but it's like if we took the time to show and showcase every single life that was of a person that was murdered, whether they were armed, unarmed, it's like, what difference would that make? A huge difference in the way people perceive these officer killings, because then you really wouldn't have time to see the officer killings standing out, because it would be a constant, this person was murdered, this person was murdered, this person was murdered. It's like, then we can really see, oh my God, this is like an epidemic.
If you remember back in 1989 during the self-destruction movement, they were the rap community was addressing black on black crime, but we lately have realized that is a misnomer, because most people who are murdered in the communities in which they live and the people they live around. So there's a such thing as a black on black crime, and that's put to the forefront of a lot of people's psyche. But there's also white on white crime, because 89% of blacks are killed by other blacks. But in the white community, 94% of whites are killed by other whites. So what's the bigger epidemic?
And the blacks are the smaller minority also. So our percentages, if you compare it, to the actual numbers, would really be small.
It would really be smaller, yes. And so a lot of times that narrative of the black on black crime, we should concentrate on that before officer killings. The difference in that paradigm is that it's an abuse of authority. And whenever it comes to, like, say, two people on the street, they just kill each other, just, they kill each other, and if they don't have stand your ground laws or castle doctrine inside of their state, there's no abuse of power there. It's really just mutual combat, and then it turns into murder, manslaughter, or whatever. But when it becomes a person, it's like hunting. It's not a sport. if one person doesn't know they're playing the game. You know, so these guys are they get stopped by the police and they're like, okay, well, it's not fair because you have the gun, I have to obey your authority, and if I do something to you, I'm a cop killer. But if you shoot me, you can just say that I was lunging for your gun. It's justified because I was scared. And a lot of times people don't understand that the reason why these officers aren't getting indicted is because when it comes to cops, all they have to prove is that they were in fear of their lives, not that there was a weapon present or that that person was intending to use a weapon. It's just that intrinsic fear. So at what point do we say that if you were born or raised to think that you're afraid of black people, every killing of a black man will be justified at that point? You know what I'm saying? So,
I wanted to ask you, as a black male, how, when you hear about these things, when you wake up in the morning, another, guy has been killed innocently, how does that make you feel?
Well, luckily, I feel lucky that I'm not so young as to be perceived as a threat. I can control the way I dress because I'm grown. I have a good job. But what about these kids who are trapped in these communities who are kind of, I don't hate to use the word slaves, but slaves to fashion trends, the hand-me-downs, to having to wear a hoodie because they can't afford a coat. If you can't control your environment or you can't control the way you're being perceived or control where you're coming from or anything, I think that I feel really sorry or very, I feel saddened by the fact that some kids, when they get to a situation, they can see that anger in that cop's eyes, and they realize that I'm going to do everything I was told. I'm going to say yes sir, no sir, whatever, and then something happens. They still get shot. You know what I'm saying? They still get thrown in the back of a police van or something like that. Every time I hear it. And I hate to be so desensitized to it that I keep thinking it doesn't surprise me. There's another one. There's the statistic that, the numbers are going up. And instead of me being saddened by it, now I'm trying to research it to make sure that I can find ways to equip younger people into learning to control their image, to realize that being black isn't about getting that face tattoo. Being black isn't about being a thug. Being black isn't about raising your voice to cops to let them know that you don't care about what they do to you because they hold all the cards. I just think we need to redefine what our young people think of as blackness and make sure it's not some combative, suggestive, hypersexualized, just ratchet thing. And they realize they can be black and wear a tie. They can be black and speak properly. Not to, all black people have two languages they speak. They speak black and they speak interview. You know what I'm saying? We can change it. We can change for the moment. But what about those kids who are marginalizing themselves? Face tattoos, neck tattoos, trying to live up to a stereotype to be accepted by their peers. But when they deal with the world, it becomes a hostile place.
Wow. Kick, I think this is a good time for a break. Because then when we come back, I want us to talk about what happened in Charleston, South Carolina. Because this was an adult man that was shot by the police. But we're going to take a break. We're going to talk about that when we get back. Okay? Back to Betty. I'm your host, Cynthia Thompson. Now, before we went on break, we were talking about how police officers see some black men, especially our young men, as a threat. But just recently, we had a killing in South Carolina where the man was stopped for a traffic stop. I don't know the whole story. Kick, I know you can help me with it. So why do you think that happened to him? Because in my opinion, I don't see where he would have been a threat to the police officer.
Well, he was a threat, but he was a threat to that man's authority or his privilege. Because it goes back to, we got to look at what KRS-One called police. He said it moved from the word overseer to officer. And that's what they ride horses, they police people. Because remember, we didn't have a police force in America before the slaves were freed. We didn't have large prisons or anything like that. The police were put there to protect property and to make sure that folks complied with white laws and Jim Crow laws and things like that. So this guy, a lot of officers, if you look at the way that they treat black folks versus white folks, because look, they're complaining about Baltimore, the rioting,
right?
But they didn't complain when Kentucky was burning over a sports game. Those people weren't rioting; they were just having fun. But when riot and protest for our rights. We're thugs, we're rioters, all that kind of stuff. So we got to pay attention to the way the media portrays us. But back to Walter Scott, I think that the reason why he shot him is he's like, how dare he turn and run from me? He wasn't a murderer or a bank robber or a rapist or anything. He just had some child support warrants, and that warranted death.
And he wasn't running that fast.
He wasn't going that fast.
He could have tripped him. He could have went to him and tripped him. But I mean, when I saw the clip, it's like the officer literally took a stance like he was at target practice and just fired off. And I mean, you don't need that many shots to
not
make a man
one shot,
go down.
not two, but eight.
Yeah.
Wow.
Eight.
Yeah.
In the back.
Yeah, he was not running that fast.
No.
And then it's like once he was on the ground, it's kind of like, to me, when I looked at it, the officer didn't seem concerned. It's kind of like...
He didn't give him any immediate medical hit. He didn't give him CPR. The other officer that came up didn't give him CPR. And he also came and dropped the
something,
taser.
yeah.
I say something, but I'm just going to put it out there. A taser, because he knew that he was going to say he went for my taser or my gun or whatever, and that became the initial report. But then when we seen the video, that was all a lie.
And even the lie about them giving him CPR.
Yes, they didn't give him any.
No.
They just sort of looked at him and checked. They finally checked his pulse. It was like, oh.
No, what they ran up and handcuffed his hands behind his back.
That was the first
that
thing
is the first thing they
The
did.
man's dead. How? Why?
That's what they did.
Yeah.
So do you think it's a good thing that we have all these gadgets where we can videotape it? But it seems that since we have it, the police, they really don't care.
Well, we got and another thing that I want to speak about the Eric Garner situation, it parallels with that. There's a push now to have officers having cameras now, and a lot of
they can turn them off.
Yeah, the black
They can
community,
turn them off?
They can turn them off, and they're supposed to turn them on during traffic stops. But what a lot of folks are saying, and we have to pay attention to this, is that since the Eric Garner thing, when that was taped, the whole thing, he said he couldn't breathe. He wasn't committing a crime and everything. Will those cameras work? Will they be listened to?
Let's refresh our viewers on what happened to Eric.
Well, he was breaking up a fight
in New York.
Yeah, and then he was supposedly selling untaxed cigarettes, and the police came to ask him, his ID and everything, and he didn't make any sudden movements. They just got behind him and choked him.
Up on him. Yeah.
Choked him out.
Yeah, they did.
And he said, "I can't breathe," and that's what everybody has on their shirts now. He said he couldn't breathe, and he died of cardiac arrest.
You could hear him saying, "I can't breathe," over
and over again.
And you were about to say something about the cameras then.
Yeah, so a lot of politicians are pushing for body cameras. Some people are trying to veto those. The governors are trying to veto those laws in certain places. But the Eric Garner case shows us that even when we have hard evidence, maybe it won't be listened to. Those cops weren't indicted, and they used illegal chokehold, which was on tape. He didn't pose a threat. He wasn't in commission of a felony. He didn't even have to, by law, show him his ID. But those cameras that they're saying are going to solve the situation, Eric Garner blows that whole theory out of the water.
Well,
There's cameras all over the place. I mean, if you think about every city that I drive through, there's cameras on every single corner, like the stoplights, at the crosswalks. There's cameras everywhere. So I think if they needed evidence,
the ones you see, and there's a lot more you don't see.
True, because I used to work with a company where we install those cameras, and like you're saying, there are ways where you can't even see, you don't even know it's there, and it's doing it at night during the daytime. So I believe there's footage available now that they could get if they really wanted. And even with some of the cops that have the cams in their cars, we've seen where the police officer will turn it off or strategically walk or take the person to the side so you truly can't see what's going on, and then they'll come back into view at the end. It's like, so even with the body cameras, they can turn them off.
Well, one of the things that's happening here in North Carolina is the state is working on some laws as to how those cameras, the body cameras, can be used or viewed, not so much used but viewed. And so the state right now is proposing that you have to have permission from a judge to view those tapes. So
they're useless.
Well, so on one hand, we here in Charlotte are saying, well, this is what we want, because obviously we've made the purchase of the cameras, we made these investments, but then you have the people on the state side saying, you know what, Yeah, okay, you can have those cameras. We're gonna make sure you don't see them.
Red tape. We're gonna start red tape and bureaucracy.
Red tape, exactly, to block it. So and so then we're right back in that box again. You know, unless you find some judge who and the thing of it is that you also had to remember about North Carolina is judges are elected.
Oh yes.
And so one of the other things that the state is proposing is that now your political designation be put on the ballot so everybody would know whether you're independent or Democrat or Republican, and to make it more partisan instead of it being bipartisan. They want it to be very partisan. So there are other things underfoot as to we think it's wide open. We think we're living one way, but then when you get down into the weeds, or no, not even having to get in the weeds, if you pay attention to what's going on, we have so many things working against us.
Political level.
On the political level, yes.
So tell me, you all, we've been talking about the crimes against black folks that the police have been shooting our young people. What do you think the solution is to stop all of this, or will it ever stop?
Can we do transplants, heart transplants, mind transplants? I don't know, but one thing I think about too, like our children now, 8 and 10-year-olds do not look like 8 and 10-year-olds, and you can't change that.
Yeah.
Like I know some 10-year-olds that are almost as tall as me, and I'm 6'2". So, you know, I think the body structure has changed as well, so that might be why they seem more threatening to police officers, because, you know, when I was younger, I was still tall, but not as many children were very, very tall. They were more like normal kid size. So I don't know if that plays a part in it as well, because now they're becoming a threat earlier because their size seems bigger. So they look like adults. They have the muscles. They're tall. They're built. You know, their faces look like grown men. Some of them have hair. You know, so maybe that's creating that threat so early, and that's why we're seeing officers shooting younger and younger children, because the children aren't looking like children anymore. Even the girls. We're not going to go there, but you know. So, I mean, maybe that's part of it, too.
That's true. I really think, like you talked about body image, you know, I think that is, like, a really big focus. Because, like, if I look on the news, they'll talk about somebody being robbed or shot, and the first, you know, you look, it's a black male with dreads. A lot of the times, not all the time, but a lot of the times. And now, every guy with dreads, they're, you know, judged by the, you know, they always judge the outer side, you know. So, image to me is a whole lot.
I know some friends that cut their dreads because of that.
I think it's bigger than that. I think you can be clean cut. It does not matter. It's the fact that you're black. And so they see skin color before they see anything else. And that's the one thing you cannot hide. We are what we are, and so to me, I think it's in the psychology. I don't know how you change psychology, because you know when it's been bred that black is bad, you know how do you change that? I don't know. I don't know.
I think that a lot of times we say we have to spend time with people that aren't like us to learn them, or to make people, I guess, more sensitive to our plight. But what I've seen is that I've known people white guys who hung around black people all their lives, and they you would think that they would grow to be these very inclusive people, but as they get to a certain age and they have to rely on their white privilege to get ahead, they become just as racist as the ones who hung around nothing but rednecks and white folks. You know what I'm saying? But then I've seen those people who hang around rednecks and white folks in their family, and then they spend their lives trying to stave off that image, and they become very inclusive. They don't want to be like what they saw their parents to be. So I think that the only way that's going to happen, that we're going to change people's minds about who we are, is for us to change ourselves, not to whiten ourselves up or to submit to conformity. I think that we should tell people that we need to redefine what blackness is. The dreads and stuff. If you know that people ain't gonna give you a job because you got dreads, don't accent that by putting a tattoo on your face or getting a tattoo on your neck or putting a tattoo on your hand or something, just something like that. If you know to understand how you're going to be perceived, maybe you should do something that would counteract that. So, because I know this boy who just got into like all these Ivy League schools. I saw his picture. He had a hat on and long dreads, and I was like, wow, you know what I'm saying? Maybe he's going to redefine how people look at people with dreads. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we shouldn't have to conform, because the dread thing doesn't mean you're a criminal. It originally was a Rastafarian thing, and before it was that, it was in Africa as a way to keep our hair neat. But the media has, like you said, they showing all these brothers that look like criminals supposedly in white eyes and putting them on the screen. So that becomes emblazoned in people's heads that those are criminals. So next time I see the person with dreads, I'm a move away from them. But because of the Obama effect, I think that in the psyche of white folks a lot of times now, they don't fear the thug anymore. They fear the clean-cut brother, because they feel like that person's a threat to their livelihood and their job. So.
I think if we focus to get down to the very, very base and focus on being humans and rebuilding the human race, supporting each other, I think that's where it could start. Instead of, I know we cannot get away from black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, but at the end of the day, we are all humans. It's like, and I think people forget that, and they just look at the skin and try to put people into a little box or category. But we are all humans sharing this planet, and we have got to learn how to cohabitate. If we don't, we're going to kill off the planet and ourselves, and then we won't have to worry about it no more.
It won't be a problem.
It won't be a problem. It'll be non-existent.
Yeah, that's true. I see what you're saying about that. But we have to teach people to respect the humanity in other people. Because a lot of times, I think Dr. James Small says that we've always been, or Dr. Clark said that we've always been hospitable to strangers. When back in Africa and things like that, before we were colonialized. But Dr. Small, James Small, says that we shop with people. We want to cohabitate with other people, but we have to demand that people respect our humanity, because we are very humanly, we're very humanity based when it comes to people that aren't like us. We want people to know how we live and show them our subtle nuances and teach them how to dance like us and teach them to talk like us and teach them to like the things that we like. But a lot of people don't show that same humanity toward us. A lot of people won't bring us in because they've been conditioned to think that underneath all of our niceties and our pleasantries, that we have this deep, dark soul that wants to take things from you. Like, that's what a lot of folks feel. Like a lot of white, like if you talk to a lot of folks, they just don't trust black people, and they don't even know why, because it's been conditioned into them at an early age.
Again, for coming and talking about this, we could talk on and on and on about this subject, but unfortunately, we are out of time again. So you all must come back again so we can keep this conversation going, and maybe we can find the answer. Okay? And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching my show, A Better You, here on Public Access 21, every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Thank you so much.